unlimited drama series.
The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., cutting through the silence of my basement workshop like a buzzsaw through pine. I was hunched over my workbench, soldering connections on a residential panel, the familiar smell of flux and heated metal filling my nostrils. 23 years as an electrical contractor, and I still found peace in the precision of connecting wires, making things work the way they should. "David Green speaking," I answered, wiping sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. "Mr. Green? This is Marcus at the Grandview Hotel downtown. You need to come here immediately. There's been an incident involving your wife." My blood turned to ice water. Marianne was supposed to be at a legal conference, staying overnight at the hotel. She'd left that morning in her silver BMW, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the successful corporate attorney she'd worked so hard to become. "What kind of incident?" "Sir, I'd rather discuss this in person. The police are here." "Police?" The word hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I set down my soldering iron with shaking hands, already reaching for my jacket. "I'll be there in 2 hours." The drive through the electrical storm felt like something out of a nightmare. Rain hammered my pickup truck's windshield, while lightning split the sky in jagged white scars. I kept thinking about Marianne's behavior lately. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the way she'd grown distant and cold. I'd attributed it to work stress, the pressure of making partner at her law firm. The Grandview Hotel's lobby was a monument to modern excess. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and leather furniture that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. It was the kind of place where Marianne felt at home, where I always felt like an imposter in my work boots and flannel shirts. Detective Ray Gage was waiting for me. A thin man with tired eyes and a 5 o'clock shadow that looked 3 days old. He'd been on the force for 20 years, and it showed in the way he carried himself, like someone who'd seen too much and believed in too little. "Mr. Green? I'm Detective Gage. We need to talk." He led me to a small conference room off the lobby. On the table sat a black duffel bag, unzipped to reveal neat rows of small plastic bags filled with white powder. "This was found in your wife's hotel room," Gage said, his voice flat and professional, "along with drug paraphernalia and approximately $3,000 in cash." I stared at the bag, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Marianne didn't even drink wine with dinner most nights. The idea of her involved with drugs was like trying to picture her robbing banks or wrestling alligators. There has to be some mistake. "I'm afraid not." Gage pulled out a tablet and showed me security footage. The timestamp read 5:23 a.m. A tall man in an expensive suit was leaving Marianne's room, moving quickly down the hallway with his head down. "We have this individual on camera entering the room at approximately midnight. He left through a service exit." "Who is he? We were hoping you could tell us." "Your wife claims she doesn't know his name," said she met him at the hotel bar. The detective's tone suggested he didn't believe that story any more than I did. I studied the grainy footage, trying to make out the man's features, but the angle was wrong and the lighting poor. "Where is she now?" "Upstairs in her room with a female officer. She's not in good condition." When I saw Marianne, I barely recognized her. Her usually perfect blonde hair was tangled and matted, her makeup smeared down her cheeks in black streaks. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in a hotel bathrobe, staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. "David?" She looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Oh God, David, I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened." He said it was just something to help me relax, to forget about work for a while. "Who said that, Marianne?" I can't remember his name. Everything's so fuzzy." She started crying, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. "He left me here. When the police came, he was just gone." I wanted to comfort her, to hold her, and tell her everything would be okay. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, or the fact that she'd never mentioned meeting anyone at the hotel bar. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute," Detective Gage announced, producing a pair of handcuffs. "You have the right to remain silent," as they led her away. Marianne looked back at me with desperate eyes. "David, please, get me a good lawyer. This isn't what it looks like." But as I stood there in that hotel room, surrounded by evidence of a life I didn't recognize, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was exactly what it looked like. 3 days later, I was sitting in my kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The house felt different without Marianne, quieter, but also somehow more honest. The morning newspaper lay folded on the table, the headline reading, "Local attorney arrested in drug bust." They'd used her law firm photo, the one where she looked confident and professional. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daughter Jenny had driven up from college as soon as she heard. At 22, she had her mother's sharp intelligence and her grandfather's stubborn streak. She'd spent the last hour pacing around the kitchen, her phone constantly buzzing with messages from friends who'd seen the news. "Dad, you have to do something," she said, finally stopping her circuit to face me. "Mom's career is ruined. The firm put her on indefinite leave, and the state bar is talking about suspension. What do you want me to do, Jenny? I can't change what happened. You could support her. She needs you right now." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. She had Marianne's eyes, the same shade of green that had captivated me 25 years ago when we met in college. But there was something else there now, a hardness that reminded me uncomfortably of her mother's family. "Your mother made her choices. That's cold, Dad, even for you." Before I could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Ruth Michaels, a private investigator I'd known since high school. Ruth had been a cop for 15 years before going private, and she had a reputation for finding things people didn't want found. "David, I heard about Marianne. I'm sorry. Thanks, Ruth. It's been a hell of a week. Listen, I might have some information you need to hear. Can we meet?" An hour later, I was sitting across from Ruth in a diner on the outskirts of town. She looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for a female PI. Short gray hair, weathered face, eyes that missed nothing. She slid a manila folder across the table. "I did some digging after I heard about the arrest. Called in some favors with hotel security." Inside the folder were printouts of credit card receipts, hotel registration records, and more security photos. The man from the hallway footage was clearer in these images, and my stomach dropped as I recognized him. "Brandon Miller," I said, the name tasting like ash in my mouth. "You know him." "He works with Marianne at the firm. He's some kind of business development specialist." I studied the photos more carefully. "They've worked together on several cases over the past year." Ruth nodded grimly. "According to hotel records, this wasn't their first visit. They've been meeting here twice a month for the past 8 months. Always separate rooms, always paid in cash." 8 months? While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to pay for Jenny's college tuition and the mortgage on our house, my wife had been having an affair with some slick corporate climber who probably made more in a month than I did in a year. "There's more," Ruth said, pulling out her phone. "I managed to get access to some text messages from a contact at the phone company. These were sent the night before the arrest." She showed me the screen, and I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest as I read. "Brandon, can't wait to see you tomorrow. Brought something special to help you forget about your boring life. Marianne. David's working late again. He'll never know. Brandon, poor bastard. Does he really think you're happy playing house with a blue-collar nobody? Marianne, don't be cruel. He's a good man. Brandon, could men finish last, sweetheart? That's why you're with me." I handed the phone back to Ruth, my hands steady despite the rage building inside me. "How much do I owe you for this?" "Nothing. We're friends." She leaned back in her booth, studying my face. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." But that was a lie. As I drove home, a plan was already forming in my mind. Brandon Miller thought I was just some blue-collar nobody, too stupid to see what was happening in my own marriage. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I found Brandon Miller at Finnegan's Bar, a trendy downtown establishment where lawyers and business types went to see and be seen. He was holding court at a corner table, regaling a group of admirers with what I assumed was a carefully edited version of recent events. Even from across the room, I could see the expensive suit, the perfect hair, the kind of confident smile that came from never having to worry about money. I'd spent the afternoon at Big Mike's boxing gym, working out my anger on a heavy bag until my knuckles were raw. Mike, who'd been training fighters for 30 years, had taken one look at me and known something was wrong. "Whatever's eating at you, son, don't let it make you stupid," he'd said, wrapping my hands with practiced efficiency. Smart beats strong every time. Mace. Now, watching Brandon laugh with his friends while my wife sat in a jail cell, I tried to remember that advice. I walked over to his table, and the conversation gradually died as I approached. Brandon looked up at me with barely concealed disdain, like I was something unpleasant he'd found on his shoe. "David Green," he said, his voice carrying just enough volume for nearby tables to hear. "I heard about Marianne. Terrible business. Who would have thought she had such interesting hobbies?" His companions snickered, and I felt heat rise in my face. This was the man who'd seduced my wife, introduced her to drugs, and then abandoned her when things went wrong. And now he was making jokes about it. "We need to talk," I said quietly. "I don't think we do." Brandon took a sip of what looked like expensive whiskey. "Your wife's problems are her own. I barely know the woman. That's not what the hotel security footage shows." For just a moment, his confident mask slipped, and I saw something like fear in his eyes. Then it was back, the smooth corporate smile that probably closed million-dollar deals. "I think you're confused, Dave. Can I call you Dave? I was at that hotel for a business meeting. If Marianne happened to be there at the same time, well, that's just coincidence. 8 months of coincidences." Now his friends were looking uncomfortable, glancing between us like spectators at a tennis match. Brandon set down his glass and leaned back in his chair, trying to project calm authority. "I think you should leave before you say something you'll regret. The only thing I regret is not seeing what kind of man you really are sooner." Brandon stood up, and I was surprised to realize he was shorter than me by several inches. All that presence and confidence, and he was just a small man in an expensive suit. "Your wife came to me, Dave. She was lonely, neglected, married to a man who couldn't give her the life she deserved. I didn't seduce her, I rescued her." The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my voice level. "Is that what you call it? Rescue? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you destroyed her life and then ran away when the consequences caught up with you. She made her own choices, with drugs you provided. I never forced her to do anything." His voice was getting louder now, drawing attention from other patrons. "She wanted excitement, adventure, something more than her pathetic suburban existence. I gave her what she was looking for." I picked up his whiskey glass and threw the contents in his face. The amber liquid splashed across his perfect features, and for a moment, the entire bar went silent. "Next time you want to destroy someone's marriage," I said, as he sputtered and wiped his face with a bar napkin, "pick on someone who won't fight back." I turned and walked out before he could respond, leaving him standing there dripping and humiliated in front of his friends. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ruth Michaels had an office above a used bookstore on Elm Street, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a 1940s detective novel. The walls were covered with filing cabinets, old photographs, and a collection of law enforcement memorabilia that spoke to her 15 years on the force. She was waiting for me with a pot of coffee and a grim expression. "I heard about your little scene at Finnegan's last night," she said, pouring me a cup. "Half the legal community is talking about it." "Good. Let them talk. David, I know you're angry, but you need to be smart about this. Brandon Miller isn't just some random affair partner. He's connected. His family has money, influence. If you go after him the wrong way, he'll destroy you." I sat down in the chair across from her desk, noting the way she'd arranged everything within easy reach: phone, computer, weapon. Old habits from her police days. "What did you find out about him?" Ruth opened a thick folder and spread its contents across her desk. Bank statements, credit reports, employment records, even old college transcripts. She'd been busy. Brandon Miller, 34 years old, graduated from Harvard Law but never took the bar exam. Instead, he went into business development, specializing in corporate acquisitions. He's good at his job. Made partner at Hartwell, Morrison and Associates 3 years ago. That's Marianne's firm. Right. He joined the company 5 years ago, about 6 months before Marianne made senior associate. According to my sources, he's the one who recommended her for several high-profile cases. The implication was clear. Brandon hadn't just seduced my wife. He'd been manipulating her career, using his influence to put her in positions where she'd be grateful to him, dependent on him. "There's more," Ruth continued, pulling out a series of photographs. "These were taken over the past 2 weeks, at various locations around the city. The photos showed Brandon meeting with different people, always in public places, always brief encounters that looked like business meetings, but had an undercurrent of something else. In one image, he was handing an envelope to a woman I didn't recognize. In another, he was receiving what looked like a small package from a man in an expensive car. I think your wife wasn't his first victim," Ruth said. I've identified at least 3 other women he's been involved with over the past 2 years. All of them attorneys or businesswomen. All of them married. All of them with access to confidential information that could be valuable to the right buyer. You think he's running some kind of blackmail operation? I think he's a predator who uses sex and drugs to compromise women in positions of power. Whether it's for blackmail, insider information, or just the thrill of control, I can't say yet. But your wife isn't the first, and she won't be the last. I studied the photographs, feeling pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Marianne's sudden interest in certain cases, her late-night phone calls, the way she'd started asking questions about my work that seemed oddly specific. I'd thought she was finally taking an interest in my business. Now I wondered if she'd been gathering information for Brandon. What do you need from me? Access to Marianne's home office, her computer, files, anything that might show what kind of information she was sharing with him. She's still in jail. Her bail hearing isn't until tomorrow. Ruth smiled. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a glimmer of
Intimate text intro another weather memory.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
hope in her eyes. And then we have tonight. Marianne's home office was on the second floor of our house, a converted bedroom with built-in bookshelves and a view of the backyard where she used to garden before work consumed her life. I'd always respected her privacy, never entering without permission, never touching her files or computer. Now, standing in the doorway with Ruth beside me, I felt like I was violating something sacred. Second thoughts? Ruth asked, noting my hesitation. No. She lost the right to privacy when she decided to betray our marriage. Ruth moved to Marianne's desk and powered up her computer while I searched through file cabinets. The machine was password protected, but Ruth had come prepared with a small device that she plugged into a USB port. Police confiscated her work laptop, but most people keep personal copies of important files, she explained as the device worked. Especially lawyers. They're paranoid about losing billable hours to technical problems. I was going through Marianne's personal files when I found the folder marked Consultation Notes. Inside were dozens of documents related to cases she'd worked on over the past year. But what caught my attention were the handwritten notes in the margins. Names, dates, and what looked like meeting times, none of which had anything to do with legal work. Ruth, look at this. She came over and studied the documents I'd spread across the desk. Her expression grew darker as she read. These are insider trading opportunities, she said finally. Look here, she's noted when certain companies were planning mergers or acquisitions, information that wouldn't be public for weeks or months, and Brandon would have access to all of this through her. More than that, look at these dates. Ruth pointed to a series of entries from 6 months ago. These correspond to some major market movements. If someone had advanced knowledge of these deals and traded accordingly. She trailed off as her device beeped. The computer screen showed Marianne's desktop, cluttered with folders and documents. Ruth immediately opened the email program and began scrolling through messages. Here we go, she said, clicking on a folder labeled Personal. Encrypted emails between Marianne and someone called Investor One. The encryption wasn't particularly sophisticated, and Ruth's software cracked it within minutes. What we found made my blood run cold. The emails went back almost a year, starting with innocent flirtation and gradually escalating to explicit sexual content. But woven throughout the personal messages were references to legal cases, client information, and strategic business intelligence that Marianne had no business sharing with anyone outside her firm. She was feeding him everything, I said, scrolling through months of betrayal. Client lists, merger plans, litigation strategies. He had access to her entire practice, and he was paying her for it. Ruth had found a separate folder containing records of deposits to a bank account I'd never known existed. Look at these amounts. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. Over the past year, she received almost $200,000. $200,000. While I'd been working overtime to pay our bills and save for retirement, my wife had been selling confidential information to her lover. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I felt physically sick. David, there's something else. Ruth's voice was grim as she opened another folder. Insurance policies, financial records, even a copy of your will. She was documenting your assets. Why would she need that? I think she was planning to leave you. All of this, the affair, the information selling, even the drug arrest, it might have been part of an exit strategy. I sat down heavily in Marianne's chair, surrounded by evidence of a conspiracy I'd never suspected. My wife hadn't just cheated on me, she'd been systematically preparing to destroy me. We need to copy all of this, I said finally. Every file, every email, every document. Already on it. Ruth was transferring files to an external drive. But David, you need to understand something. This information could destroy a lot of people, not just Marianne and Brandon. Some of these clients are powerful, connected. If we expose this, there will be consequences. I looked around the office that had been my wife's sanctuary, now revealed as the headquarters of her betrayal. On the bookshelf were photos of our wedding, our daughter's graduation, family vacations where we'd all smiled and pretended to be happy. All of it had been a lie. Let there be consequences, I said. I'm done protecting people who don't deserve it. Jenny was waiting for me when I got home, sitting at the kitchen table with red-rimmed eyes and a cup of tea that had gone cold. She looked up as I entered, and I could see she'd been crying. The bail hearing was this afternoon, she said without preamble. Mom's lawyer got her released on $50,000 bail. She'll be home tomorrow. I felt my carefully constructed plans shifting. I'd counted on having more time before Marianne returned. Time to decide how to use what Ruth and I had discovered. How did she make bail? We don't have that kind of money. Uncle Richard posted it. Richard Morrison, Marianne's older brother and a partner at her law firm. I should have expected him to get involved. Richard had never liked me, never thought I was good enough for his sister. He'd probably see this crisis as an opportunity to finally break us up. He wants to meet with you tomorrow morning, Jenny continued. He says there are things you need to discuss about Mom's situation. I'll bet there are. Jenny studied my face with the sharp intelligence she'd inherited from her mother. Dad, what's going on? You're different since the arrest. Harder. I sat down across from her, looking at my daughter and wondering how much of the truth she could handle. She was 22, an adult, but she was also Marianne's daughter, and some part of her would always see her mother as the victim in this situation. Your mother made some bad choices, Jenny. Worse than you know. Everyone makes mistakes. That doesn't mean you stop loving them. What if the mistakes weren't mistakes? What if they were deliberate choices made over a long period of time? Before she could answer, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone. And friend. I showed the message to Jenny, who frowned as she read it. Who do you think it is? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. The next morning, I met Richard Morrison at his law office downtown. The building was a monument to legal success, marble floors, mahogany paneling, and oil paintings of stern-faced judges who looked like they'd never had a moment of doubt in their lives. Richard's office was on the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a commanding view of the city. Richard himself was everything I wasn't: tall, polished, expensively dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from being born into privilege. He was 5 years older than Marianne, and he'd spent those years making sure everyone knew he was the successful one in the family. David, he said, not bothering to get up from behind his massive desk. Thank you for coming. What do you want, Richard? Straight to the point. I like that. He leaned back in his leather chair, studying me like I was a specimen under a microscope. I want to help my sister through this difficult time. By posting her bail? That's just the beginning. Marianne needs a good defense attorney, someone who specializes in drug cases. I've already made some calls, and what do you expect from me? Richard's smile was cold and calculating. Your support, your testimony about her character. A united front that shows the court she has a stable home environment to return to. Even though she doesn't? What do you mean? I pulled out a folder containing copies of some of the evidence Ruth and I had found. Not everything. I wasn't ready to play all my cards yet, but enough to show Richard that I knew more than he thought. I mean, your sister has been having an affair for almost a year. I mean, she's been selling confidential client information. I mean, this whole marriage has been a lie. Richard's face went pale as he read through the documents. When he looked up, his expression had changed from condescension to something approaching respect. Where did you get this? Does it matter? The question is, what are you going to do about it? David, you don't understand the implications of what you're showing me. If this information becomes public, it won't just destroy Marianne's career, it could bring down the entire firm. We have clients who trusted us with sensitive information, and if they learn it was compromised, then maybe you should have been more careful about who you made partner. Richard stood up and walked to his window, staring out at the city below. When he turned back to face me, he looked older, more tired. What do you want? I want the truth, all of it. I want to know how long you've known about Brandon Miller and what he's been doing to the women at your firm. I suspected something was wrong, but I had no proof. Brandon is very careful, very smart. He never leaves a trail that leads back to him. Until now. Until now, Richard agreed. David, I know we've had our differences, but we both care about Marianne. If we work together, we might be able to minimize the damage. I looked at this man who'd spent 25 years treating me like hired help, and I realized that for the first time in our relationship, I held all the cards. I'll think about it, I said, gathering up my documents. But Richard, the days of me taking orders from you and your family are over. Riverside Park at 2 o'clock was nearly deserted. Just a few joggers and dog walkers enjoying the unseasonably warm weather. I found an empty bench near the river and waited, wondering who had sent the mysterious text message. I didn't have to wait long. The woman who approached me was in her mid-30s, professionally dressed but with an air of nervous energy that suggested she was operating outside her comfort zone. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and the kind of pale complexion that came from spending too much time under fluorescent office lights. Mr. Green, I'm Sarah Chen. I work at Hartwell Morrison & Associates. I recognized the name. She was one of the junior associates at Marianne's firm, someone I'd met briefly at office parties, but never really talked to. You sent the text? Yes. She sat down beside me, keeping several feet of distance between us. I heard about what happened to Marianne, and I thought you should know that she's not the only one. What do you mean? Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages, similar to the ones Ruth had uncovered between Marianne and Brandon. The tone was flirtatious, manipulative, designed to make the recipient feel special and desired. He started with compliments about my work, invitations to grab coffee, that sort of thing. Then it escalated to dinner, drinks, suggestions that we could help each other's careers. Did you get involved with him? Almost. Her voice was quiet, ashamed. I was lonely, working 80-hour weeks, barely seeing my friends or family. When someone like Brandon Miller pays attention to you, makes you feel important, it's intoxicating. What stopped you? I saw what happened to Lisa Rodriguez. The name meant nothing to me, but Sarah's expression suggested it should. Lisa was a senior associate, very talented, very ambitious. She and Brandon had an affair that lasted about 6 months. Then suddenly she was making mistakes, missing deadlines, showing up to work looking like she hadn't slept. The partners started questioning her judgment, her reliability. What happened to her? She was asked to resign. Officially, it was performance issues. Unofficially, everyone knew she'd had some kind of breakdown. She moved to Seattle, works for a small firm now doing divorce cases. Sarah showed me another set of photos on her phone. A woman in her early 30s, with hollow eyes, and the kind of haunted expression I'd started seeing in my own mirror. I think Brandon deliberately destroyed her career. I think he gets some kind of satisfaction from building women up and then tearing them down. Why are you telling me this? Because Marianne was different. With the others, Brandon seemed to lose interest once he'd broken them. But with your wife, he kept escalating. The drugs, the money, the information sharing. It was like he was preparing for something bigger. Like what? Sarah hesitated, then pulled out a manila folder from her purse. 3 weeks ago, I was working late when I saw Brandon in Marianne's office. They didn't know I was there, and I heard them talking about something called the Hartwell Solution. What's that? I don't know, but I did some research. The firm has been struggling financially for the past 2 years. Several major clients have left, and there are rumors about potential bankruptcy. If someone wanted to acquire the firm's assets at a discount, the pieces were starting to come together in my mind. Brandon wasn't just a predator who enjoyed destroying women. He was a corporate raider using seduction and blackmail to position himself for a hostile takeover. You think he's been gathering information to sell to a competitor or to use as leverage against the partners? And think about it. If he has compromising information on multiple associates, evidence of ethics violations, and client confidentiality breaches, he could force the firm to sell to his backers at whatever price he names. And Marianne was his inside source for everything. Not just a source. I think she was supposed to be his partner. The drug arrest wasn't part of the plan. That was Brandon getting sloppy, maybe overconfident. Now he's scrambling to cover his tracks. I thought about the insurance policies and financial records Ruth and I had found in Marianne's office. Maybe she hadn't been planning to leave me. Maybe she'd been planning to leave with Brandon after they'd destroyed her firm and stolen its assets. What do you want from me, Sarah? Help me stop him. I've been documenting everything I can find, but I need someone on the outside, someone he doesn't suspect. If we can expose what he's been doing, we can save your firm and destroy the man who's been manipulating your colleagues. Exactly. I looked at this young woman who was risking her career to do the right thing, and I made a decision that would change everything. What do you need me to do? The plan Sarah and I developed was elegant in its simplicity. Brandon thought he was the puppet master, pulling strings and manipulating everyone around him for his own benefit. We were going to use that arrogance against him. Ruth had discovered that Brandon maintained a private office in a building across town, separate from his workspace at Hartwell, Morrison and Associates. According to the lease agreement, it was registered to a shell company called Miller Acquisitions. Sarah had managed to get a key from the building's maintenance supervisor, a friend of her father's who owed the family a favor. The office is on the 7th floor, Sarah explained as we sat in Ruth's car across the street from the building. Brandon usually works there on Saturday afternoons, when the building is mostly empty. What's our cover story if we get caught? Ruth asked, checking her camera equipment one more time. Building inspection, I said. I'm a licensed electrical contractor. If anyone asks, we're checking the wiring for code violations. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was better than nothing. We waited until we saw Brandon's Mercedes pull into the parking garage, then gave him 15 minutes to get settled before making our move. The building was typical of modern office construction, glass and steel, designed more for appearance than functionality. The elevator was out of order, so we took the stairs, Ruth carrying her equipment in a toolbox that looked appropriately professional. Brandon's office was at